Welcome back to the One Shot Show. I'm Matt and you're Mock. No, wait, I fucked that up.
Oh, God, you missed the tag where GM's go to level up. This is where GM's go to level up.
Everything's falling apart. How do we make this interesting, Matt? How do we make failure interesting?
Let's get naked. Let's.
The curtain behind you is open, Matt. I just noticed. Sorry.
We're keeping that in.
Should we go again?
This episode is all about failing forward.
Yeah.
Look, obviously, failure in your games doesn't usually look like that intro.
No.
Usually, it just looks like some unfortunate rolls and some tension points that resolve as badly as possible. A bit of an unlucky streak. But narratively, you've still got to get out of that hole somehow. So, how do we go about that as GMs?
Well, you bring up a really interesting thing where you're talking about the way that failure looks in games. And the thing about role-playing games, any of them that use dice in any capacity, that mechanic is there to facilitate failure. That is the base upon which the entire pyramid of pretty much every tabletop RPG is built on. Failure is part of every game and every story that I certainly have ever run. And without failure at all, there's no tension.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea of leaving it up to the dice, that's why we do it. You're totally right. Like, it would be a much simpler game if, you're just comparing numbers to one another. Okay, my character has, fives when they want to hit something, and if that's higher than the defense of 4, then it's a hit, and they deal 3 damage every time they do that. Yeah, you could totally do that. But, yeah, it takes a lot of the tension and a lot of the interest out of the game. It's one of the big things that we play tabletop RPGs for. However, that failure can still leave you in the hole, sometimes in terms of narrative, sometimes in terms of solving the problem immediately in front of you. How do we get out of that hole?
Well, the way that you get out of that, whenever a player specifically fails at something, the worst way you could react as a game master is to immediately shut them down, let them know that whatever they're trying has been a complete and total failure, a dead end, and then move on. What you should do, and I think a really good piece of advice when you're dealing with specifically a player's failure in any context, is asking them what else they can try. Allow them to be creative and really stretch their imagination to come up with a bunch of alternative solutions. And you're welcome to make those more and more and more difficult as you go, but allow your players to really have some input into your world. And I find that simply telling someone that they have hit that dead end kind of drains the energy out of a game, and it disincentivizes people from trying things.
There's an interesting thing that you kind of lean on a little bit there. I've talked famously in the past about something I call yes, but, no, and. I'm not the only person who calls it that. It's a concept that existed before me. But no and sits very heavily on the failure side of tension resolution. And obviously no and is, we ask the question, does this thing work? The answer is no. And now here's this other thing that makes it more difficult than before. That works really well in stories and movies and, those sorts of narratives. In a tabletop role-playing game, it's hard to up the stakes in any particular kind of way of the back of a failure, because usually the failure incurs an inherent cost on its own, and I find that the no and is usually just no and now you have fewer resources. Hey, I'm going to cast this spell to solve the problem. Does it work? No, and now you've not got that spell anymore. You've cast it. That's one fewer spell slot, one fewer spell usage you've got today. But we do still have to open a door of some kind to allow the players to move closer to a yes.
Often that will look like the most common type of failure in any role-playing game that I'm familiar with happens in combat. It's spells, like you're describing, or it's attack rolls, or different things like that. And often the avenues to open up for eventual success will look like, what do you do with your second action, or what does the next person do, or how do you support each other in that sense?
Or it could even be the classic one as a partial success. Hey, I want to use Thunderwave to destroy this pillar and bring it down on the creature's head.
A lot of that design is baked into a lot of mechanics where you'll do something like half damage or have a much lesser effect on your enemy.
Or in the case of using Thunderwave to bring down the ceiling, maybe, you roll really bad damage. You just roll all ones. And what you say as a GM is, it doesn't take the pillar down, but it does give it some substantial cracks. You failed. You did not succeed in what you were attempting to do, which is break this pillar, bring the ceiling down. But you did at least take a step along the way, and now maybe someone else can do something that could break the pillar.
I've got a little cheat code for making this feel better for your players.
Is it just the Konami code? You just put an up, down, down, left, right, A, B.
I don't think anybody's actually tried that with me in a real life game. Maybe they will now. My cheat code for this is when something goes horribly wrong for a player, it feels very negative to come across and say, your attack just misses wildly, or you don't pull off what you do. What I like to do is ask them, hey, what went wrong? And then they can describe if they want to lean into comedy. They can say, someone left a banana peel in this 1,000-year-old tomb. Who put that there? It wasn't my fault. Or they can lean into just a really, really, really vital thing here when we're talking about failure. And this is especially important for people who are just starting out in the game, or especially from my personal experience, which is running for kids who can really genuinely emotionally react to telling them that they're just not good enough, even in an adventuring world, is don't make failure their fault. If they have built an incredibly competent wizard with a huge brain or a fighter who's genuinely good with their weapons, their skill should never be the cause of failure to pull off what they're doing. It should always be something else in the environment, or you should always ask them what goes wrong to put the power back in their hands.
And I suppose there's actually two different things that we've wound up talking about now. One is the sort of failure in the narrative sense, right?
Yeah.
Which is where, if you've heard the term fail forward, that's what people are referring to there. Then there is failure in the mechanical sense, which is a bit of a different beast, and I think is a lot of what you've been talking about. And it's about making that interesting. It's about making that fun. I love that idea of asking the player, why did that not work? Because I inherently do that as a player. I'm very used to it, and it's because usually as a GM, I am describing that to the player as well if they don't offer their own one-up.
You're an
right?
experienced role player.
So the wizard has just cast Fireball for the first time. It goes off really well. It absolutely kicks the ass of all these goblins that are attacking. And then, the barbarian rolls up to the plate and he rolls with advantage. He does a reckless attack and he just misses. And he misses. He rolls like a 2 and a 3. And I will usually say something like, I like to imagine that you were so distracted by the fireball, you're like, I didn't know he could do that. Right?
Incorporate failure into the narrative of the scene. Tie things together.
Exactly.
Don't just say, you miss, move on.
Exactly. And I do that as a player as well, right? When I have those great successes or great failures, I narrate them in a way that makes them make sense. Because as you say, if you've got an extremely skilled fighter and you just have a really bad turn where you miss like 3 times in a row across your, attack and then extra attack and then action surge and so on, it feels really bad. But if you can have some narrative piece to it that's like you didn't have the grip on your sword right, or maybe the turn prior they got hit with a crit and it's like you're having to readjust the weight of your blade in your hand and you haven't quite got it right. Or the enemy seems to have adapted a little bit. Your blows should land true, but they're just so nimble that they've started to learn your pattern and
Yes.
they dodge you effortlessly.
Another really, really good cheat code is to have whatever your players are up against react to how they perform in combat. If you've got like 3 misses in a row from your fighter, don't let that just kind of drop off into nothingness, because that's like a really strange situation to happen.
That's a lot of meat. That you can use that.
Have your troll start mocking them.
Yeah.
And then you're adding a new layer to your narrative, because combat isn't the end of narrative. Combat is an evolution of narrative.
Yeah. The mocking one is a classic one, right? It's like, actually, no, you did hit 3 times. They've just realized that your blade can't penetrate this scaly part of their hide.
Yeah.
So they've been angling that in the way. You hit them 3 times, it doesn't break through, and they go, ha, blade not sharp enough. Classic.
Absolutely. And we've talked a lot about like mechanical failures, a way to dress it up, make players feel better, and then continue the narrative going. But you talked very briefly just before about a concept called failing forward. And you asked me if I was familiar with it, and I am, but maybe there are people listening who don't know what failing forward is. Could you extemporate?
There may be some of them. Failing forward, basically it's saying failure shouldn't be a dead end. It can be a full stop, but a fresh sentence must still start. Failing forward basically means if there is a possibility of failure, make sure that that failure doesn't grind everything to a total and utter halt. Now, what that looks like in real terms in your games, it could mean you try to pick the lock, you fail again, your lockpick is too damaged to do it. Now, look, there's still a door. You can still get through it. You just can't pick the lock anymore. The forward is the barbarian kicks it down instead, right? Like, that is, we've found this also. Now, that's not ideal because that was very noisy and it alerts everyone to your escape. It is still a worse outcome measurably than if you had succeeded in the lockpick.
That's a really good example because failure still allows that door to be broken down, but now there are extra consequences, the stakes are higher, and you're going to have to expend way more resources and put in way more effort to do something that could have been done stealthily before.
And I'll even go the extra step on that is you can have total and utter catastrophic failure in that circumstance. You go to pick the lock, you fail. You try again, you fail. You pick brakes. The barbarian goes, enough of this. He smacks up against the door. He rolls a 2. He goes, that's it. I'm going to rage. He recklessly attacks. He rolls a 2 and a 3. Now the guards round you up and arrest you.
New story.
That is total failure. Next step, we're breaking out of prison.
Yes, absolutely. Now we're into really big picture narrative failure. What if you don't stop the evil dragon? What if the comet hits the planet and the planet blows up?
And look, I want to talk about this in its own episode. What if you TPK?
Yeah.
What if the whole party dies?
You all wake up in the afterlife. You got to find your way back to your bodies.
Hold that. We're going to do that in another episode.
Oh, yes.
Because,
all right.
like I said, that is fully an episode in itself. But, I mean, there is no limit to the scope of what failing forward can apply to. At the end of the day, it just means don't be afraid of the failure. Think about how you could get out, or think about how that failure could inform the next thing. Maybe in your mind you'd planned this, this heist, this break-in, steal the document, get out. What happens is the dice turn it into a disaster. You get arrested. You don't even succeed in stealing the document, and now they know that you're coming after this document, and you've got to do this prison break sequence instead. And then the document's being moved to a more secure location. So now you've got to steal it while it's on the road, and they know you're coming, so you got to talk to this glamorist who's going to be able to disguise it, and so on.
And this
exactly.
This is really important because this applies not only to players, like don't feel bad if you fail, try some new shit. It also applies to GMs.
Yeah.
If there is a particular story you want to tell, and your players jump off the railroad or they fail to stop somebody, and you're now like off in the wilderness and you're having to frantically improvise, don't panic.
Yeah.
Because you can do this. There is more story to be told. And failure of your planned story to be exactly how you wanted isn't a full stop failure.
And there's a narratively what you're doing. In a very philosophical sense. Narratively, this is the exact same structure as tangents, right? Let's say your quest is find the item. You consult with the scholar. The scholar goes, I know where the item is. I'll tell you if you do this thing for me. On the way to doing that thing, you encounter this person who is integral to doing it, and they say, oh, I'll help you if you do this thing for me. And you reach the point where you've got to unwind like 4 or 5 things in a row just to finish that main thread of we're doing the thing. Failing forward is essentially creating unplanned tangents, right? At the end of the day, you will still be able to unwind all of those tangents and complete the main task. Do not think about it as closing it off forever.
Yeah.
That being said, don't be afraid of closing it off forever.
Yeah.
You can have a world that lives with the consequences. And you've talked about that, that you don't fail the world-ending apocalypse. All right, the last 5 levels of this campaign is going to be trying to recover from the apocalypse as best as we can. We cannot undo it. Maybe at one point we could. We failed to steal the document. It's gone. We're never getting it now. It's over. what else could we do? How else could we solve the problem that this document was meant to solve? Or maybe we were just doing it on behalf of a benefactor and we missed that payday.
And I think the really important point here that we're both kind of talking about is the fact that failure doesn't mean an end to narrative possibilities.
Exactly.
It means 3 more doors have opened. And those doors lead to horrible, horrible places, but they are places that you absolutely can go, and hopefully your players will enjoy going to those places.
Yeah, as the saying goes, when the GM closes a door, he opens a window. In this instance, the GM is God.
I think that's all. I think we can we close the door on this episode?
We could close the door on this episode, yeah.
I think we can. There are many more narrative choices we could possibly make in our real lives outside of the podcast studio.
What's most important is, despite the terrible start to this episode, it's going to be a really good finish. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one. If you like what you just heard, feel free to support us on Patreon. Every little bit helps. Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow.